Okay, so we are live. I'm with Cathy Reisenwitz here, and let me zoom out, Cathy, so that I can put the title there. Great. So before I introduce Cathy, and I might let Cathy kind of introduce herself, let me say a little bit about what this series is. For those who just kind of found it on Twitter, where we're live streaming, or on YouTube through the algorithms and don't know what's going on. This being series is a combination of learning about the person and then also learning about how they came to be, but then also learning about their views on social, cultural, political issues. And so I try to pick people who have interesting lives and interesting ideas. And Cathy is one of them. I've been following Cathy on Twitter for a very long time. I think she's very smart. She's very funny, and I mean, she's just all that in a bag of chips. So she has a very interesting aura, I think is how I said it before, a presence or something. But it's something about people who don't fit in boxes that I'm drawn to, and you don't fit in a box, and so therefore I'm drawn to you, and you're really cool. So. I,
That's very flattering. Thank you so much.
Yeah, yeah, no problem, no problem. I speak from the heart. I'm always, I don't hold back. So look, I want you to say a little bit about who you are and just whatever you want. And then what we'll do is we'll go down the questions that I sent you, and we'll have a nice little back and forth.
Sounds great. Yeah. So, in a nutshell, I am a sex worker, content creator for OnlyFans. I am a writer. I have a newsletter called Sex and the State, and I write about political issues, particularly pertaining to uh, decriminalizing sex work, destigmatizing sex work, sex positive, kind of libertarian feminism. And I grew up evangelical and conservative in the Deep South. And so I've had a long journey of reevaluating the things that I was taught to believe. And yeah, I'm on Twitter a lot. And yeah, that's kind of me in a nutshell.
Okay, all right. Well, before I get to those questions, just in general, were you able to combine your evangelical Christian background with your current experiences as a sex worker? Is that possible?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I consider myself a Christian still, but I do not, I guess I don't functionally believe in objective morality. So I don't believe that there's some way for me to know, for example, like what God thinks I should do. And I definitely don't think that the Bible, especially as interpreted by, uh, the modern Christian church, is a good guide set of guidelines for living. I think that's been pretty well demonstrated that that's not the case. And so I think that people form their morality based on their aesthetics and moral intuitions. And I don't believe that my aesthetics and moral intuitions are in any way objectively better than anyone else's. And so my issue is like, okay, what do we want the world to look like? And then what does the evidence say about the ways to live and the policies to support? Um, what does the evidence say about how those will get us closer to or further from the places that we want to go?
Okay. All right. Well, that's really interesting. I don't want to dive too much into that right now. Um, I did not expect that answer though. I thought you would have said, "No, I'm done with that. I've moved on." So to hear you say that you still consider yourself a Christian is interesting, which actually would kind of fit right in with your whole complicated presence, right? You're always throwing curveballs. Okay. Well, you are moving back to Alabama. So I'm asking this question more to kind of get a sense of who you are as a person. So as you explain why you're going back to Alabama, I and the audience will learn more about Cathy in general. So what's the deal? Why move back?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that one constant of my life is that I've always been a kind of mission-driven person, and so when I get an idea of something that I wanna do with my life, I do what it takes to get it done. So, for example, when I was in, Alabama, I really wanted to I was doing marketing right out of school, and then, while I was in school, I got really into libertarianism, and so I thought, rather than writing marketing copy for printers and deer urine, like I'd rather sell libertarianism because I think these are good ideas that should have more influence in the world. So I moved to Washington, D.C. and got a job with Reason Magazine and spent the next 2 years, 2.5 years working in libertarian think tanks. And then that was shockingly a very high work, low pay
Hmm.
kind of situation.
Hmm.
Um, and so I thought, okay, well, let me do what I can do to make money full time and then just kind of do my activism on the side. And I've been doing that for the past, I don't know, 7 years. And I'm finally at a place now where I really want to get back to being able to do activism full time. I want to write blogs and newsletters and books about the things that I really care about. And so I intend to keep working and move from San Francisco, which is very expensive, to my hometown in Alabama, Huntsville, which is much cheaper, and be closer to family and save up and hopefully be able to do what I love for a living full time within the next 5 to 9 years.
Okay. Wait, isn't Huntsville like the rocket capital of America or something like that?
Yeah, yeah.
It's got like NASA there or something, right?
It's
Or
got
did they build
NASA, a
the
lot of missile
rockets?
defense.
Yeah, I think I remember as a kid, like we are supposed to take a field trip there or something. But I don't know, it's so long ago. But yeah, I mean, you don't have to live in. I mean, it's nice to live in places like San Francisco and DC, kind of like we were talking before we went live. But it's not necessary to kind of reach people and do the things that you want to do. So
Yeah, no, it's not necessary. I mean, it is better. I would prefer to live in San Francisco than Huntsville for if no other reason than I don't like to drive, and I don't think driving is like good for people. I love dense, walkable cities, but money is an object, and so I can Alabama has the internet, so I can still reach people from
that's
Alabama.
right.
And honestly, I'm really excited about getting back to Alabama in that I spent 5 years in DC and 4 years in San Francisco, so I've spent the last almost decade in these kind of like liberal enclaves. And when I look at conservatism, which I really only get to see through the lens of media, I don't recognize it at all. Like I don't understand conservatism despite having grown up conservative. And so I look forward to talking to actual people, not mediated through the media or Twitter, and just be like, what do you believe? Like, what's important to you? Because I think it's important that people, not just speak to people who already kind of have their same social circles and assumptions, that we've become very polarized, and I want to kind of get out of my own filter bubble a little bit.
Yeah, I agree with that. So, Vivek T, I'm looking at some response on the chat here. He was surprised at you being saying that you were a Christian. So I'm not the only one. Very cool and heterodox, as the kids say. Speaking of heterodox, I mean, I think you're right that we need to not just stay in our bubbles. I have a hard time with that. But I think it's important that yeah, you get to experience other people who think differently or have different lives than you, and you probably find that a lot of the things they say are not so crazy when you actually talk to them and understand the reasons that they have.
Yeah. Um, I think a lot of people's conclusions flow from their premises, and I don't know what their premises are. I think one thing that's been really interesting for me to watch is kind of you know, we're in what I would describe as a bit of a epistemological crisis at the moment, where it's just really not very profitable to do deep investigative reporting. It's a lot more profitable to just produce identitarian conflict content, like, oh, look what the other side is doing. versus like these are the facts. And so I'm really curious about like how are people getting their facts? How are they vetting their sources? Um, yeah, I look forward to learning more about that.
Okay, because you are certainly moving into the heart of conservative America. So you'll certainly get that opportunity. So, and since I'm not from the heart of conservative, but South Carolina is a red state, and although most of my, I mean, almost all of my family, I would imagine, is liberal. I certainly have friends who I would imagine, we don't talk about politics much, are conservative. And so, I mean, when I'm not on Twitter and I'm talking to them, they're great people. Then when I get on Twitter, I kind of want to kind of lampoon those types. So it's good that you're taking that attitude. I think it's really cool. Okay, now you're going back, but why did you leave in the first place?
You know, it's funny. I was really scared to leave. I grew up in Alabama, um, and it was super scary. But I honestly, I really wanted to work at Reason. Reason really helped shape my political beliefs. They helped me really, for the first time, understand what the war on drugs like really was doing, and change my mind on foreign policy and on sex work and like all kinds of things. And so I wanted to do for other people what Reason had done for me. And so I this was before widespread remote work, and so I had the choice between not working at Reason or working at Reason in DC or working at Reason in LA, and LA is car bound and I've never been good at driving. I've never liked driving. And so I me and my boyfriend at the time,
Wait,
he
wait, wait,
also
wait,
got
wait,
a
wait, wait.
job.
What do you mean you're not good at driving?
I'm a terrible driver. I get into car accidents.
I mean, but can't you?
Large large white vehicles are my specialty.
What? I mean, but you can't improve. Like you can't like practice or something.
I probably could have, but I'm also not super athletic, and I think most people have kind of a genetic bound where you can move in the bound, but you are going to stay in a bound, and I think
Okay.
that my bound is just not where I'd want it to be, and who knows what I think that being bad at driving came first, and the urbanism came later, but now I'm ideologically committed to being anti-car, so that's going to be a real
Can we
downgrade.
expect an accident from you in a couple of months, Kathy? I hope not. I like you very much. Don't get in an accident. All right.
I hope not as well. I hope I can just bike around, but I don't have to commute anywhere, so that's nice.
Hmm. So you left Alabama because you reason was great, and you wanted to work there. Now, you was it that you said, "Look, like I'm just kind of making this up here. Like, hey, reason, I would like to work for you, and this is me," or was there something that you had done, and they saw you in another space? How did that happen?
No, I did not have any kind of public profile when I applied to work at Reason. I had been working tirelessly on the anarcho-capitalism blog up until that point. So I guess they could verify my ideological commitments, but there was certainly no profile for me. I just applied,
Hmm.
and I guess they probably don't get a whole lot of like kind of early to mid career marketers applying, and so they were like, "Sure, we'll hire you." And yeah, I mean, and I did like cities. Like even as a kid, I kind of had dreams of like living in a big city and being able to walk everywhere um, and things like that, but it was also not probably something I would have done, like, absent, a really compelling job just because it was so scary and new and so much change.
Okay. Well, now you did the reason thing, and I looked at your CV to kind of get a sense of what you're doing now. So the reason chapter of your life is over, and I saw on your CV these head of content occupations.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I can just read it and say, okay, she's the head of content, but what does that actually mean?
Yeah, I mean, it'll differ company to company, but generally speaking, companies have figured out that if you produce high quality, useful content that is useful to your target audience, so that's a good way to get their attention
Uh-huh.
and their email address and possibly their business. So I do content marketing for companies, just writing like original blog posts and reports and case studies and things like that to add value to people's lives for free so that they consider using the product that we're producing.
Okay. So your I guess full-time job is writing, and then you do your Substack, which we'll talk about a little bit later, and that's writing. I find that very hard to do. So I guess in a way, my full-time job is a little bit writing, but it's more teaching and stuff. But I find that when I have to do a lot of writing there, I'm drained. Like it's just hard for me to produce something for my Substack.
Yeah, I do like love to write. I've always loved to write. I really tried to do something different because writing is very competitive and low pay.
Hmm.
But I love to do it. It's the thing that I'm best at by far. And I will say sometimes it is difficult for me to write, full time and do my Substack, but it's usually kind of a thing where like it's hard to get going, but once I'm going, it's easy, and it helps because it helps that my Substack is, like, very much my diary, like,
It
I
is,
don't
yeah.
yeah, I don't, like, go through multiple rounds of revisions, I don't, like, terribly overthink what I'm doing, like, I am not, trying to, target a particular audience or give people a particular thing that they're looking for. I really just do it as, like, this is how I process my thoughts and emotions, and, if people enjoy it and benefit from it, all the better, but ultimately, like, it's for me, and so it's funny that sometimes it takes some activation energy for me to write for my Substack, but then after I do, I almost always find that I'm actually more energized for my paid work, that I have more to give to the other things that I'm doing when I do this thing that I find really, um, rewarding and enriching and useful to me. But that's the thing about writing is that, I really don't I think writing it is good for everyone.
Hmm.
And, most people can benefit from, if nothing else, just keeping a journal or just, writing when they have big emotions. But I don't think writing a lot is for most people because for most people it is really tiring. And for me, it just never has been. Like I've always journaled. Um, when I found out about the existence of Diaryland, like I set one up, I had a live journal. Like it's just something that I have done almost like breathing. And if that's not how writing feels for you, then like don't be in a writing heavy role because for me, like writing is the easy part of any of my work. It's the thinking and reading and learning and analyzing, like that's the work. The writing is the it's almost automatic.
Yeah, that's interesting. So I would like to say I'm very similar um, in that I find writing kind of easy, which a lot of people say no, it's not. But I find it easy. The quality of writing now might not be as high as I'd like it, but when it comes to putting words on paper, oh, forget it. I can just do it. I have I think a big reservoir of writing energy. It gets sapped on my job, but I have a big reservoir, and I think you do too. I think some people just don't. So you tell them to write a thousand words, even if they could be technically proficient at it, they just don't have the energy for it. So it takes them a very long time to do it. Whereas other people, forget it. They can just reel that out every day or every other day. So it's good that you're doing what you like.
I'm extremely, extremely grateful to be able to pay my bills and save a little bit of money on basically just writing and a little porn. I'm super, super, super grateful to be able to do that. I graduated college in 2008, and being able to make a living as a writer was anything but guaranteed. So I'm super grateful that I've been able to do it, and that's required, moving around and taking risks, and it is a lot of work, but it is work that I love. And I think for me, at some point someone told me, like, you just have a really your writing has a lot of voice to it. And I was like, yeah, that's true. And so for me, like, I'm not trying to make my writing sound like anything. It is very like natural for me, and so I think it takes less energy than for someone who maybe is a little less voicey in their writing. Um, but it's also, it's a taste thing. People don't like it sometimes, but it is what it is. So
Yeah, I mean, you gotta write the way you feel. I mean, you probably don't remember, but I don't know, maybe a year ago, I was putting together this assignment where I was trying to teach science writing. It's like a research methods course, and so one of the assignments was them to write for the public. And so at that time, I think I was reading, as I was doing that assignment, I was reading something that you had wrote or had just read something you had wrote, and I said, "Oh, that's it. That's a good way for students." I think I told you how students should write, because it was a triangulation in a way. And I try to write like this when possible, where I say, okay, here is the evidence, the facts, whether it be some dense research article or maybe it's something from a white paper or something. It doesn't matter, but there are the facts, and then here's me, and I'm going to put me in that too. And then the third thing is going to be the actual story that I'm trying to tell, or point I'm trying to make, or concept I'm trying to teach. And then if you can somehow marry those three things, it's like a symphony of a sort. And so I could not. I wasn't going to give them anything that you wrote, because maybe their parents would get upset with me. But the idea was of what you write is what I wanted them to write. So, and you do that a lot, and not all the time. I mean, that's a lot to put those three things together, but you do it enough, and it's quite impressive. And yeah, so
Thank you. That's so flattering. I appreciate that. I actually feel super self-conscious about the narrative aspect. I've never written fiction. I don't usually feel like I'm writing a narrative. I feel very comfortable in the make an argument based on data, and I feel very comfortable in the talk about how I think and feel about things. But as far as like telling a story with like a plot to like any kind of like narrative arc, that's very challenging to me. So that's nice that there was some kind of narrative that came through. It's something I've been definitely trying to work on over the past few years. And when I do, I don't read much fiction, but I watch a lot of television, and a lot of it's fiction. And so I'll think about like, okay, what is working for me about the story, or what is not working for me about the story, and how do I incorporate that into my writing? But it's difficult, and I find that most things written about writing are just god awful for some reason. So that's been tough. I'm like, maybe I should take a writing class, or I don't know. I'm open to suggestions.
yeah, yeah. Well, okay, so I wasn't saying that your writing had I don't know. I must have misspoke, but I wasn't saying that your writing had a narrative so much. I was more saying that you put yourself in it, the facts in it, and then you make a point, or you're
Okay.
explaining some idea or something like that. So it's not necessarily like
Yeah.
you're telling a story with that, but yeah, yeah, okay. Now you've sort of talked around it a little bit about your libertarianism, but how would you describe yourself politically?
I say that I'm a sex positive feminist, neoliberal slash libertarian. I think the sex positive feminist like describes him perfectly. I think the libertarian slash neoliberal is obviously like just the best words that most people have some concept of what they mean to describe my collection of beliefs, but obviously, incomplete and imperfect way to describe what I believe. Essentially, I believe in economic growth and
Wait, Kathy,
personal.
wait. Can we go back? I need to get the labels before you go to describe the labels. So,
Okay,
sex positive feminist,
no, it's
liber.
sex positive libertarian feminist. Yeah,
You had a fourth one in there.
neoliberal.
Okay, sex. Okay, fine. So those are the four labels. All right,
Yeah,
now
we'll
now
go with that.
describe. What all that means.
Sex positive means I believe that sex is inherently morally neutral. Feminist
Mhm.
means I oppose sexism. Libertarian means I believe in economic growth and personal liberty. Neoliberal means I believe in evidence-based policy and a social safety net.
Okay. Is that what neoliberal means?
I mean, who the fuck knows? But that's what I mean when I say it.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. Now that's pretty. So I guess those things, the last two certainly go together, and I wonder if the sex positive part always goes with that political part. But
No. No, it doesn't, as I learned through hard experience.
I see. Well, you know what? Let's jump ahead to the sex positive part, and then I'll come back and talk about Sex in the State and OnlyFans, since we're kind of on that um, uh, plane, I guess. So let's see here. Now, you mentioned that sex positive is that it's oh, what's wrong with my labels here? There it is. Sex positive is that sex is morally neutral. It's not good or bad. Okay.
Right.
All right. I don't think people would have an issue with that, actually. I mean,
You would be surprised.
well,
Yeah.
well, certainly not the bad part. They might say, well, sex isn't inherently good. It's just for reproductive purposes or something like that. Maybe someone will say that, but who would say that it's inherently bad?
Well, I don't think very many people would say sex, you know, as a concept is inherently bad. I think that where the distinction lies is that, okay, let's define sex.
Okay,
Sex is anything that two or more, or one, depending. I will say I have an extremely expansive definition of sex is anything done by an adult consensually for sexual pleasure. So for some people, spanking is sex. For some people, rope bondage is sex. For some people, foot play is sex. I think all that counts. I'm not in the gatekeeping sex business, and so there are a lot of people who would say that certain kinds of even adult consensual sex, and I would say anything that's not adult or consensual is not sex. That's rape. But so certain kinds of sex are morally wrong. On the extreme end, you have on the extreme, like let's say right and right wing end, you would say homosexual sex is morally
I
wrong,
see.
or sex outside of marriage is morally wrong. On the extreme left end, you would say even adult consensual BDSM is morally wrong. And so, sex positive feminism says you can think what you want to about your own sex life, but when it comes to other people's sex, uh, that's where the inherent comes in. So maybe BDSM is wrong for you, but BDSM is not inherently morally wrong. And maybe gay sex is not right for you, but gay sex is not inherently morally wrong. All sex is inherently morally neutral. It's not good or bad, it just is.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Well, the way you explain it, I mean, so I'm very, um, maybe I'm very sexually repressed, Kathy, but I'm not, but I would like to think that I'm sex positive in the way that you describe it, because I don't think it's, I think whatever someone wants to do, as a consenting adult, they should be able to do. So I guess in that way, I'm sex positive. Okay. Well, how did you? Well, you're gonna say, wait a minute. You're gonna say something.
Yeah, I mean, you bring up a really interesting distinction, and I think that is kind of a core insight that I would like people to recognize is that something can make you uncomfortable without being morally wrong, right? I'm not asking
Yeah.
people to be
Yeah.
comfortable with all kinds of sex. Like some kinds of sex are fucking squicky and weird and like, uncomfortable, and that's okay. I'm not asking everyone to be into every kind of sex or like approve of every kind of sex. I'm just saying there's no when you look at the pros and cons of moralizing about other people's sex, there are far more cons than pros to doing it. So, like, just don't. Like, don't stigmatize it, don't legislate it, just, let people do what they wanna do, and it doesn't mean that you're not allowed to feel how you feel.
Okay. All right. Well, let me throw a curveball then. Let me
Please.
test you a little bit. You said earlier that you are a or challenge, not test. I'm not giving you a question, multiple choice something, but I'm going to challenge you a little bit. So you mentioned earlier that you are a neoliberal, and you define that as evidence-based policy. Okay. Well, suppose there is this evidence out there that certain types of sex has negative outcomes for society. Would that then conflict with being sex positive?
That's a good question. That's very interesting.
Ah.
Um, I would say not necessarily, because I don't think that you would need to moralize about it, right? Like, I think that, let's say that we found out that BDSM actually, on average, causes trauma, or like worsens trauma, right?
Mm-hmm.
You wouldn't need to say BDSM is wrong. You would just need to say, on average, the evidence indicates that this exacerbates trauma, which may mean that no one should do it. It may mean that you should take a test before you do it to see whether you're likely in the group that it exacerbates trauma for.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I mean by evidence-based policy, is that the moralizing is in whatever outcome you want. So the moralizing would be, do you like trauma or not? That's kind of a moral distinction, or it's some kind of higher order thing that you would want to have more of or less of. The evidence comes in of, okay, what does the evidence say that this particular choice is likely to have, with regard to the outcome? And that there's no moralizing there. It's just looking at evidence. And so I don't necessarily think that um, that would necessarily be in conflict. I don't know of any kind of sex that the evidence indicates is not good for people. I mean, I guess if you have like a shit ton of anal sex, it can cause butt problems. But again, like, that's not a moral issue. I have no moral issue with people
Right.
having all the butt sex they want, but I think they should be informed about the risks. And so, yeah, I
Yeah.
don't think there's any tension there.
Okay. I'm sure somewhere down the line there's going to be some kind of activity that will have some negative outcomes. I
Of
just
course.
can't imagine that it's not happening. Um,
But I think, again, like, when you look at the negative outcomes, it's really important to disentangle the stigma from the act itself. So,
mhm.
for example, and also just like other issues. So one thing that I've written about is, you do see an association between people who have more sexual partners and an earlier sexual debut have worse outcomes. So more likely to go to jail, more likely to have periods of unemployment, yada yada. Well, a lot of conservatives will trot this out and be like, see, having this kind of sex is bad. And, they're trying to make an evidence-based case for what is ultimately a moral argument. The problem with their evidence in this case is that when you correct for the things that unite people who have more sexual partners and an earlier sexual debut and people who have negative outcomes, the connection is there regardless of whether they actually have the sex. So people who have more adverse childhood experiences are more likely to have more sex and earlier sex, and also more likely to have a bad time in adulthood. It's not The sex is a result of these preconditions. It's not a
Say-
cause.
uh-huh. Oh, that's interesting. That's interesting. That reminds me a little bit about other types of deviance. There's this notion that okay, a kid does something bad. What's the same thing you're saying actually? A kid does something bad in 11th grade, and so then of course this has negative outcomes for him as an adult, and so you want to say, well, that kid should not have done that because that's what caused the problems as an adult. But there are some preconditions that led to these things happening, and that's the reason why that kid did those things. It's not the same argument that you're making, but it's somewhat similar. Now, how did you become sex positive? Like, what happened? You certainly weren't that way as an evangelical Christian.
That is true. I was not sex positive. I actually was a true love waits person and lost my virginity on my wedding night at 22 years old.
Oh, that's so
Because,
sweet.
yeah, I don't half-ass things. Um, Yeah, I mean, it was a slow evolution, certainly over many years. There were certain touch points that I would say my transition out of evangelical Christianity. So I am a Christian, I'm not an evangelical. Were pretty much all around sex and gender. I remember when I was in college, my friend took me to church with her. I had stopped going to church regularly at this point, and the person who was running the Sunday school said that Paul prohibited, Paul as in the Apostle Paul, prohibited women from teaching men. And I just thought that was the dumbest shit I'd ever heard. And so I started to look into, different interpretations of these verses that Paul had written. And I was also in college, I took a biblical perspectives class. So that was the first. I'd grown up in the church, going 3 times a week to church, but I never really understood what the Bible was, like how it came together, and just like the empirical aspects of what the Bible is and what Christianity is and how it came to be. And I was taught to be very anti-empirical. I was kind of taught like anti-skepticism. So it really took me a while to like learn how to think as an adult and evaluate evidence. But any hoodle. So based on
Wait. Anti-empirical meaning you have to have faith, even if
yeah,
things that you see in front of you contradict that faith. You should follow the faith. And anti-skeptic, is that the same thing? Like just having a belief is more than questioning that belief or something?
I would say that questioning your beliefs was extremely discouraged. And so anything that would cause you to have any kind of doubt was highly discouraged. And I
Mhm.
would put like science and the scientific method and skepticism and rationality, like those things were very much discouraged and frowned upon to the extent that they were even discussed.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, in the churches that I grew up in. And, I'm not blaming my parents are not like this. I'm not blaming them. It's more the churches that I grew up in and my peers in those churches. But yeah, so I started to read about like what is the Bible, and I realized that a lot of these letters that Paul was writing to these churches that are in the Bible are like letters to individual churches at specific times about specific matters. Like Paul even tells certain church leaders, like, "Hey, you owe this person money." Like, there's no evidence that this was meant to be a uh, ethical, universal to be followed for the rest of time. Some of these are just like, here's how to go along to get along in the situation in which you find yourself at that time. So it seemed clear to me that this prohibition on women teaching was much more contextual than universal as some kind of moral obligation.
Hmm.
And so then my sister came out of the closet when I was in college as well. And that got me thinking more about the Bible's prohibitions on homosexuality. And I kind of came to the same conclusion of like, it was really, not kosher at the time to be gay. And the early Christians were trying to avoid attracting undue attention. And so if they had been accepting of homosexuality, that would have been very attention grabbing at the time. And so that was a fight they didn't want to take on more than God is really upset if I have sex with a woman. Like to me, like that just didn't make any common sense to me. I'm like, why would God care that my sister wants to have sex with women instead of men, and why should I get to have a marriage and sex but she doesn't, just because I'm attracted to men. I didn't know I was bi at the time, and she's attracted to women. Like that just didn't make sense. And so that was part of my move away from using the Bible as interpreted by the Southern Baptist Church as a guidepost for how to live. And then
Okay,
I would
Kathy,
say,
let me push back a little bit. Um, First, I should say I don't have any faith. I would like to have faith. You're actually better than me. I grew up as a Christian, and I'm just not a part. I mean, I would love to, but it's just not in me. I don't have belief. But I want to push back a
I
little
feel
bit
the way about sports.
about sports.
Yeah, like, I wish I could enjoy it.
It's
I
not
wish I
the
could be
same.
emotionally invested in the
I
outcome of this
see.
ball game.
Well, you should be. Look, I mean, the Giants. I mean, you're there. The Giants and the Dodgers have a rivalry, and they had one of the greatest games, wild card games, or something last year. You should have been
Falling asleep.
that. Yeah, but okay. What was I? What was I? What was I gonna? Where was I going with this? Oh, that's right. So, okay, Cathy Reisenwitz, not a biblical scholar, just some redhead kid, fumbles through some books and sees something and comes to some grand revelation. Now, you didn't run your ideas by some pastor or some theologian or something to check it out. Are you sure you're right?
No, no, I am not sure I'm right about anything. Nope. Oh, man. That's something I miss about being evangelical. I have not felt right.
Things, yeah,
I've
yeah.
not felt confident, that level of confidence since then.
It's a
No, I mean,
power, isn't it? That's why I wish
oh
I
my
was
God,
Christian. It's amazing, or I wish I
it's
believed, I
wonderful.
should say. Yes, it's wonderful. But yeah, I mean, how arrogant of you, Cathy, to just come to these conclusions, you know, without checking with someone who's got all that book learning and stuff.
Well, I'll finish the story and then that'll give you a fuller picture of me.
Oh,
So I was kind of on the whole thing. I kind of just tried not to think about it too much. And then I was not excited about the rest of my life staying married to the person that I married, and I was considering divorce. And he's a wonderful person. It just we had different visions of what an ideal life looked like, and I married him at 22. I had just graduated college. Like, neither of us knew what we wanted our lives to look like. But over the next 4 years, we got a better idea, and they weren't aligned. And the church, my husband and I had the same argument the before we married and the same argument the day we divorced. And so I was like, let's see a therapist to like resolve this conflict. And he would only see our pastor and his wife. And our pastor and his wife sat us down, and all they wanted to talk about was my relationship with Jesus, because the only thing that mattered was me staying in the marriage. And the main thing that was wrong was that I was sinning by considering divorce. And I thought about it and I was like, going back to the gay thing, like, does it really make sense that God would want me to spend the rest of my life in a marriage that I don't want to be in, force my husband to be in a marriage with someone who doesn't want to be married to him because I made a promise at 22? That the math isn't mathing. Like, that doesn't make sense. And so I had to decide then and there, do I believe this being like this set of beliefs that can be summed up as like the Bible is a useful guide to morality, enough to stay in this marriage for the rest of my life, even though I don't think it's the best thing for me? And I decided I didn't believe it enough, and that was the real beginning of the deconstruction for me. I mean, I still had a lot of those beliefs. I was pro-life, I was, yada yada, but that's when it stopped being, well, the Bible said so is the reason I believe something. That's when it started being, I need something else to back up what I believe, because the Bible said so isn't good enough anymore.
yeah, I see. I guess I had a similar, not the married at 22 thing, but this whole idea of, and then going through that trouble, but this idea that the Bible said so. I mean, it just doesn't ring true to me, right? And so I think a lot of people, they kind of fall out of religion for that reason. Now we've got. I want to shift gears a little bit and make a segue in a way. So uh, probably I would have, and I think you would if you were still evangelical Christian. You would have said no to sex work, no to prostitution. Okay. Now more enlightened now, so I would not want to completely ban it, but I want to legalize it. Okay. And I know that you don't think that's a good idea. Um, you want to decriminalize it. So could you explain the difference between legalizing and decriminalizing, and then tell me why I'm wrong?
I would love nothing more. I came to my opinion on sex work through libertarianism. And yeah, it was kind of a thing where, like, well, this obviously shouldn't be illegal. So it should be legalized. And so I wrote an article for the Daily Beast in, like, I don't know, 2012, 2013. And I'm like, let's legalize prostitution. And I got a lot of angry email from sex workers saying, no, bitch, we do not want it to be legalized. We want it to be decriminalized. And I was like, oh, okay. Read a little bit about it, heard their arguments, and I'm like, okay, you're right. So I feel you on that. I think the major difference between legalization and decriminalization is regulation. So under a legalization model, sex work is highly regulated. Under a decrim model, it's not regulated at all. When I say I want decrim, I mean full decrim, not partial decrim. And so
This is
the
not
issue with
an idea. I'm cutting you
the
off,
issue.
Kathy, but I'm just, it's just amazing to me that an entire industry, a market, which is basically what it is, would be okay. Just tell me the argument. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead. Tell me why it should be decriminalized.
So the major reason is that under a regulated market, you maintain a black market. So what happens under a legalization model is essentially in any geographic area, a few brothels to get permitted, like get to exist in the white market, which means that sex workers have a limited range of options that they can choose from as far as employment goes. Uh, the power is much more in the hands of the brothel owners than the sex workers. A lot of the regulations are onerous and unhelpful and actually meant to discourage competition and entrench incumbents as opposed to, like, actually do anything for worker safety or well-being. But the biggest problem with the legalization model, again, is that there's always a black market that continues to operate. And the whole problem with criminalizing sex work is that it's associated with higher rates of STI transmission, higher rates of violence against sex workers, and more higher rates of human trafficking, sex trafficking. And so, in a legalization model, all of the problems with criminalization continue to exist. There's just a legalized market in addition to those problems. In a full decrim situation, you do see lower rates of sex trafficking. You do see lower rates of STI transmission. You do see lower rates of violence against sex workers. You see sex workers able to report instances of violence or poor labor conditions to the proper authorities. You see sex workers better able to negotiate with their clients about safety and about their rates and things like that. Like, the whole situation is just better for every sex worker under decrim versus a legalization model where sex work is better for a certain slice of sex workers but remains very bad for the rest of them.
Okay. Okay. You know what? If I just thought about it the way you said, I would certainly agree, because I think for a lot of, if I'm seeing this as a job, then I
Right.
think a lot of people who are self-employed, or even negotiating with an employee, they would like it to just to not have any government interference. So in that way, I understand that sex work is special, but I don't know if I like this idea of it being special, because then people
I
will
mean, it
say, "Go."
yeah, no, I mean, it shouldn't be special. It should be like any other job, and it should be fairly easy to get hired and to work. But
Mhm.
if you look at, like, marijuana legalization, there's still a thriving black market for cannabis, right? Because the regulations are so onerous and they're very protectionist. They're very aimed at keeping incumbents in place and prohibiting new competition, and they keep the prices artificially high. And so there's still a thriving black market for weed. And if you want sex workers to have if you want, all sex workers to have a safer working environment, a lot of uh, the danger and problems associated with sex work are a direct result of criminalization and stigmatization. And so, it's just like empirically true that sex workers tend to have a better time under decrim versus legalization. Would I also prefer that sex work were like fully white market? Like, of course. But the reality of legalization is such that it's a better model to decrim right now.
Okay, so I can't say much about the evidence with that. So I mean, I have to say, okay, I'm just the analogies. I'm trying to not see sex work as special, which means that I want to compare it to other
Right,
types of jobs, right? So I want to look at maybe
right,
a service job. So
right,
okay, you are taking an em- employer or sex work centric view, and that decriminalization benefits sex workers for all the reasons, and the evidence supports that. So okay, I'm cool. Okay, so I would try to analogize that with maybe a barber. It's a service kind of job. Okay, I don't think barbers want to have to go to barber school. They don't want to have to have any kind of regulations. They just simply want to apply their trade. That is good for the barber. Is it good for me? Like would I, the customer, prefer to have that barber go to barber school, and I don't know if they have to do this, but get safety inspections or something like that? I mean, is it so my question would be, okay, yes, is it's good for the, as you said, good for the sex worker. Do you think it might have some negative impacts for the customers or society at large if we just decriminalize it?
I don't see any evidence that decrim is worse for society at large. In fact, I'm pretty sure all rates of violence against women also decreased in areas that fully decriminalize sex work. I want to say that's true. Um, yeah, I think
I mean, I
I
don't
can
know.
understand.
It just came to me in talking with you. The kind of arguments that I have are not even about that. It just came to me as you were pointing out, uh, uh, articulated very well the benefits of decriminalization. I was like, well, okay, this is really about the sex worker, but what about the customer? My arguments were more this ooey gooey kind of sociology thing, where it's like, okay, how will society understand sex next, and will it cause a problem? Will younger people go into But those arguments are not well articulated, so I don't put them out there just yet. It's just something in my head, so I don't talk about that too much. But I have spoken with quite a few sex workers, and they all tell me that decriminalization is the best way to go. They do.
And I do think that when it comes to how a well, I think when it comes to any kind of policy, that the people who are most impacted by the policy should probably have a little more say in the policy. And I think that when it comes to regulating any kind of work, the workers should probably have more say than the average person. And so if the majority of workers in any particular industry are saying this is the regulation model we want, that's probably worth considering.
Yes, yes. So basically, you're saying in a nice way, but
With no
out. We
sex
know.
workers.
Okay.
No, I
Very good.
appreciate you
Very good.
talking about it, honestly. Like, I
Uh,
do think that people who aren't sex workers, like, need to talk about it because, we need the awareness and we need I love the pushback, but, also listen to us.
yeah, yeah. Honestly, though, because people vote, you have to consider the wider society. You can't just say listen to us, even though you're
Yeah.
right. Because those laws impacts sex workers the most, they should get the most say. Okay, now let's talk about your the content that you produce. Right, we're getting on at about an hour here, so let's kind of move on a little bit. I don't want to keep you too long. So you got this Substack, Sex in the State. Okay. Now, what's that about? I love it, but just tell the audience what it's about.
Thank you so much. Yeah, Sex and the State is, my little diary on the internet. It's where I write personal essays and political screeds that I keep trying to accurately summarize like the themes that I talk about because it can be everything from you know uh, anti-racism to criminal justice reform to sex work decrim to uh, I don't know, inflation. Just like I love psychology. I like to talk about personality studies. But I would say one thing that unites what I do is, a focus on autonomy and justice. I would say I'm really concerned with things that keep people from reaching their full potential. And so I'm really interested in economic growth and economic justice um, I'm extremely anti-authoritarian. Um, and yeah, it's a cool it's fairly short posts, usually on some kind of topic that's timely, and also a diary. So read it, you'll love it. It's hilarious.
Okay, now I just have the free version because I'm cheap, right? But you do very good work. So suppose I had the paid version,
Yeah.
or it's not a version. What is it? The next level up,
If
or
you subscribe, yeah.
if I
The
subscribe?
the things that you would get is first and foremost the satisfaction of knowing you're supporting my work, and second, the ability to comment on my posts. And very rare occasion I will write a paid subscriber only post, but I'm here to change hearts and minds first and foremost. So the vast majority of my content is totally free.
Okay, all right. Oh, so I should. So it's almost like guilting me into paying for
It
subscription.
depends on how much, you want to support what I do.
Yeah. Okay. All right. All right. Well, I haven't paid for anything yet. I'm one of those people, but I think I should start because as I write, I realize that that's people are putting a lot of effort into these things, and showing support is important to keep that going. So, all right, now what do I get with your OnlyFans?
OnlyFans is where you can see my nudes, videos of me masturbating. That's in the feed. Sometimes I write erotica as well. And then in the messages, in the DMs,
Mhm.
I sell videos of me having sex. And yeah, those are the main things.
Okay, all right. So maybe I won't be subscribing to that,
You know,
but I
your
think it's
law.
very popular. Yeah, yeah.
Not as popular as I wish, but no, I'm actually like super surprised and grateful for the amount of subscribers that I have and the generosity of my subscribers. It's been really wonderful.
Do you think you fit in like a particular niche?
Here's my thing. I would pay $10 a month to see my favorite writers get naked and have sex. I wish all of my favorite writers had OnlyFans. I'm kind of glad they don't because I couldn't afford it. But, if you like what I have to say and you want to see me naked, all this can be yours for a mere $10 a month. So I think that's my niche is like people who like my writing and think, what would make this better is to masturbate to, but I'm not really sure.
I mean, it's
It's
something to think
fascinating.
about. Yeah, I mean, on the one hand, it may be that your core audience would be guys who like you said, who like your writing and then want to also see you masturbate. Um, or just guys that like intellectual, women. What is it, sapiosexual? I think I'm trying to use these terms a little bit more.
I mean,
So
for me, like it's
uh-huh.
definitely it would one of the things that I dislike about porn is the lack of intellectual, like emotional connection, right? Like when I read someone, I am invested in them and I think that they as a person are interesting. And so if I could read every adult star who I'm attracted to is like their version of what I'm doing, like I would totally do that. I think it would be super interesting. Um, but I would say it's not just guys; it's ladies and gender nonconforming individuals as well, which I love. Um, but yeah, it's super interesting to think about. Like I think people are like, oh, like why would anyone pay for your porn when there's all this free porn on the internet? And it's like, well, why would you rather have sex with your wife than a stranger? Like, people like people, people get invested in individuals. Like, we're not just,
Mm.
totally interchangeable.
It's a good way of thinking about it. Yeah, yeah. Um, okay. Um, I wanted to finish that thought. There was something I was saying. Oh, that's right. So yeah, there are two in my mind. There are two types of audiences for you. One is the people, guy and girls, who are attracted to intellectual people, maybe. But then there's also just the person who likes how you look physically.
Hmm.
So that's very different, I think, than maybe other people in the industry who might just focus primarily on the particular look, maybe. But what do I know? What do I know?
Yeah, it's been really interesting to find out how much diversity there is in what people are attracted to. Obviously, there's going to be a certain kind of look that's going to be kind of almost universally palatable, but man, people are into all kinds of things.
Yes, that's true.
That's been cool.
Yeah, yeah, it's amazing. When I teach my class and we do the section on pornography, it's one of the more fun sections for me because every year Pornhub does that little year in I forgot what they call it, year in porn or whatever, and you got the genres and you got how long people are watching each genre and in each country and all this stuff, and it's just so much going on. It's amazing. I mean, the popular things are always the milfs that's like at the top and things like that, but you got that long tail of all these different uh, niches of porn. It's amazing. Okay, Cathy Reisenwitz, this has been fun. What will you be doing, you imagine, in 15 years?
I mean, God willing, and the creek don't rise. I'm going to be writing books and blog posts. I'll be sexing and the stating full time, extra hard.
Okay. Yeah, I hope that you get enough subscribers that that could be something you can just devote your entire time to.
Thank you. Me too.
Cathy Reisenwitz, thanks a lot. It was fun.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Mhm.